Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is David Knipe. I'm the Senior Film Programmer of the Gimli Film Festival. And luckily, we are joined here today by the film's co-writer and director, Rashaad Ernesto Green. Rashaad, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited. So, Premature is an expansion of a 2008 short film you did by the same name. Did you always envision this as a feature film?
No, I actually, after that 2008 short film, the doors sort of opened up to other possibilities, feature film, and my first feature was Gun Hill Road, and then I went into TV. It wasn't until about 6, 7 years later that the star of the short film, her name is Zora Howard, and I have been talking for years about collaborating again, but we just didn't know exactly in what capacity. And so we were talking about it 1 year after her fall semester in school, and figured we use the winter break to perhaps write something and to write a feature together. And so we did that, and that was, I think it was the winter of 2016. And we started just spitballing ideas out there, and just kind of wound up deciding that we wanted to craft a love story together. And while we were doing that, themes from the short film from 2008 and settings and characters kind of influenced us in our writing process, and we embraced it very much so.
Hmm.
And so that's how it all became Premature 2020.
Yeah. And you mentioned, collaborating with Zora, who, I can't imagine, I'm sure you can't either, imagine this project existing without her. She's so integral to it. Um, do you, did you ever, was it always in your minds that she was going to be Ayana? And also on the other end, did you ever consider playing Isaiah yourself?
Well, I'm a little bit too old for Isaiah, although I might look young. But yeah, no, I am several years older than Zora, and we
Mhm.
wouldn't want that to be, odd on screen unless that was the choice that we were going for. But
Right.
Zora was playing 17 years old in the film, although she's not 17, and the character of Isaiah we wanted to be in his early 20s was the character, although we wound up casting somebody who was a little bit older than that. But I don't think I would have been able to pull off early 20s. um, as much as I would, as much as I would have loved to,
Yeah.
but no. Yes. We wanted to, although she hadn't been in very many films, we knew that we had to make it right away if she was still going to be able to play someone so young,
Yeah.
before she grew older. And but we weren't bashful in casting the wonderful Joshua Boone, who
Mhm.
plays Isaiah. Because we just felt, although he was a little bit older than what we wanted for the character, because Zora was also older than Ayana, it kind of fit well together, and it didn't really call attention to itself as
Yeah.
far as their disparity in age.
Right. And was it difficult finding Joshua to play Isaiah? What was that casting process like?
We were very blessed. We found Joshua before the actual casting process began.
Oh, okay.
We didn't hire a casting director yet. During our first reading, our first public reading of I think it was our third draft of the script or something like that in New York. We were asking around for suggestions from people that we knew within the theater community and film community, uh, for someone who might fit the profile of Isaiah. And we kind of gave the character description and what we were looking for, and his intellect, and handsome, etc., etc.
Mhm.
And neither one of us had heard of Josh, but he came recommended, and so we cast him cold, after like seeing a couple of pictures online, and he was really, really fantastic. You know, just from that reading, we both remember, although again he was a little older than the role, his take on it was so spot on that he left a very indelible impression on both of us. And so when the actual casting came back around, uh, I asked Josh to come back in to read for the role, and I asked him, you know, please come in clean shaven, you know, with a shorter haircut, or you know, something just look young for the audition, you know, and he did, you know, where you know you can tell that he's has a little bit more life experience and he's a little bit older, but it's not to the degree where it feels like that's the point we're trying to make, and that it feels weird when watching it.
Yeah, yeah. And did those two have a lot of time to rehearse before shooting? And, or maybe was it just a credit to the writing? Is that everything feels so naturalistic and those two mesh so well together, as well as all the cast? I mean, I think of Ayana's friends. Everything just rings so true and feels so natural. What was the rehearsal process like, if any?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So we were we wanted to have, you know, a decent amount of rehearsal, you know, as with any project where you have to especially be this intimate with each other.
Mhm.
But because it was a limited time and a limited budget, we kept on decreasing the days. We thought we would have a few days, and then it was one day. And so we were all slated before production began to rehearse for one day in particular. And I was just going to rehearse with Zora and Joshua because of the sheer amount of material that they had together. We had one cast reading a few days, maybe the week prior to production, which really, really helped to hear all the voices in the room. But specifically with Joshua and Zora, because we were going to start the production with the 4 days at Isaiah's home, which is pretty much the bulk of the film, and a lot of the intense arguments and the intimate scenes are all take place in his home. And
Right.
so we wanted to rehearse for one day before production, and it just happened to coincide with the Caribbean Day Parade. So day of, we were, you know, planning for rehearsal. Someone had mentioned that the Caribbean Day Parade was happening on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, and my brain started spinning. You know, as far as like I wouldn't be able to get that kind of production value at any other point in the film. Wouldn't it be great to have Ayana and Isaiah, you know, prancing around, you know, on a date at the Caribbean Day Parade? And but because we were shooting on film as well, we shot on 16 millimeter film,
Right.
it was quite inaudible to go from, you know, not having planned it at all to calling up crew members and getting the camera truck and getting the film reels all out to Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, and getting the costume designer to, you know, to approve the costumes, and seeing if Joshua and Zora were even available.
Yeah.
And so it was inaudible that, you know, we called sort of last minute, and luckily we were able to get out there. I mean, we caught like perhaps the last hour of the parade, and to me it's one of the best moments in the film. I mean, we really feel like they're falling in love as a result of watching them in this parade and around all of these other people, and it's vibrant, and it's so colorful. And and that was pretty much the first time they ever acted together.
Wow.
So you know, you're watching what is essentially their rehearsal period. This is the first time it's like, hi, I'm Joshua, hi, I'm Zora. I mean, they had done the reading before,
Yeah.
but this was like, okay, run out there, be in love, kiss, dance. And so what you're seeing during that little Caribbean Day Parade section is them really physically interacting for the very first time.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's so lucky that you guys were able to catch that moment in that scene and kind of shoot on the fly like that. And it seems like a lot of the film was shot on the fly. And I know you had a compressed schedule and a smaller budget. Did you find yourselves calling audibles, as you say, throughout a lot of the film? And were things coming up that you were having to deal with, and any surprises?
I would say that's the blessing of independent cinema in New York, is that, you're always juggling and always having to call audibles. There are budgetary constraints and just, issues that you cannot necessarily foresee. And we couldn't exactly always throw money at a problem to make it go away.
Yeah.
So if we had planned on shooting in Coney Island, for example, and we couldn't get the bar that was going to be across the street from the beach to shut off their music until 3 o'clock in the morning. And, instead of having to shoot that first date with blasting music on the boardwalk, and then having to later ADR that entire scene, we decided instead 2 days before we shot the first date to move the entire operation to a park around the corner in Harlem, and what was going to be take place in 3 separate locations pretty much took place in one location. So the first date, if you recall, they sit on a bench eating some meat on a stick. That was supposed to be at a hot dog shop in Coney Island. And then the part where they are walking away from camera down the path, it was supposed to be on the boardwalk at Coney Island. And then their first kiss on the water was supposed to be at the beach at night at Coney Island with the amusement park behind them. And so because we couldn't really control Coney Island, we couldn't get all of our ducks lined up over there, we decided to shoot at Magic Hour in the park around the corner instead. And I think it made for a better film because it kept everything very localized, and it's truly a Harlem love story. We didn't really utilize any other spot in New York. I mean, we had one day within a music studio out in Jersey, and we had that little piece at the Caribbean Day Parade. But outside of that, it was pretty much all Harlem. And I think it gives it a different feel than if we were to have had our druthers, so to speak, and been able to branch out, and so there was another one that I recall where we were losing light in the park scene where it was like I think it was the first birthday of one of her girlfriend's sons, and we were losing light in that scene, and we had to still shoot an argument with Isaiah and Ayana that was supposed to take place on the street, and we were going to run out of time. We were like fighting that 12 o'clock, that 12-hour day, and so we had to call an audible because I didn't think we were going to have time to set up exterior lights in time for us to make it on time. So we said, well, the subway platform is already lit. And so after the scene in the Mexican restaurant where Isaiah gets into an argument with all of her friends, they go down at the 145th Street station and have that argument. That argument was supposed to be on the street, and instead takes place on the subway platform, and it feels like it shouldn't be anywhere else. With the drum player, the conga player playing behind them, and having that sort of be the rhythm underneath the scene, gives it a real nice feel to it that we would not have had otherwise if we didn't have to call the audible. So there were like just little pieces like that throughout the process that sort of worked in our favor.
Nice. And you talk about, kind of having to shoot so much of it in Harlem being a blessing. What is it about Harlem, living there, shooting there, and maybe just New York more generally that inspires you and makes you want to create?
Yeah. Well, I've lived in Harlem for the last 20 years or so, and Zora's lived in Harlem all of her life.
Okay.
And, so we're very much in love, with the neighborhood. And we actually live and have lived on the same physical block in Harlem for the last 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've known Zora since she was 11 years old, believe it or not. And yeah, so we've known each other in Harlem, and Harlem has very much influenced the types of artists we are. And and then Harlem is also changing at a very rapid pace. And so the Harlem that we love is kind of evaporating, if you catch my drift.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to capture this very specific time in Harlem's maturity uh, before it changed completely. And so we, to set this young love story in a neighborhood that still has that feel and the vestiges of the old Harlem, but before it changed completely, was something that we were interested in capturing before it was gone forever.
Yeah. I'm really glad you guys did. You mentioned knowing Zora for so long and being so close. Was it difficult to direct somebody in such an intimate piece, having known them for so long, or did that make it easier? Was there a shorthand between you two that helped on set?
I mean, there was definitely a shorthand. We really relied on each other, really leaned on each other through the process, and it was not an easy one.
Yeah.
But of course, there were some difficulties as well. Just, to be honest with you, with the intimate scenes, I had never seen somebody who I view as my younger sister in
Yeah.
that way before. So, we knew we weren't afraid to push the envelope and go there in the writing process. But then there's something to be said about the actual production
Yeah.
when you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is. And so when I was viewing the images through the monitor of someone who I know so well, and I view as like I said, like almost like a younger sister. There's that sort of like brother sister dynamic. There was a part of me that felt overprotective.
Yeah.
Um, but I got over it. Zora is was very comfortable with Josh, and Josh very comfortable with Zora, and so they kind of made me settle down. But yeah, there was a moment where I was like, oh man, it was hard for me to see someone I'm so, I guess, overprotective of in such an intimate way.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the intimacy of the film as a whole. And I think from the opening moments of the film and the images, the film announces that you're going to be seeing a film very much celebrating Black relationships, Black love, the Black body.
Mhm.
And was it important to you to depict a different kind of experience, the Black experience, than you were seeing in films?
Absolutely. I would say that that's probably the number one, the interest and the impulse behind making this particular film was probably a response to the types of images that we were seeing in Black cinema overall.
Yeah.
That we were getting sort of tired and very used to seeing Black lives portrayed in a victimized way,
Hmm.
where we see a lot of violence on Black bodies, and that seems to be the subject matter that gets a lot of traction within the industry,
Hmm.
is to see when we're harmed in some way, when we're oppressed in some way,
Yeah.
when we're beaten down, and the struggle, so to speak. And so, and we obviously understand why there's a need to continue to produce films that speak to that side of the Black experience, but we didn't feel like that's the only side of the Black experience. And we definitely felt like it was kind of like unbalanced in a way. And we wanted to contribute, our version uh, of Black lives to the other side of that scale, so to speak,
Hmm.
and to present images that weren't necessarily downtrodden, struggling, and it wasn't about Black pain or Black suffering, Black death, but more about Black life and Black love. And so that was, we asked ourselves, when's the last time that we actually saw just a love story where no one gets killed and, no one's beaten on the street? Like, when's the last time that we saw that?
Yeah.
And, we remember back to, Love Jones and Love and Basketball and these films that we grew up seeing.
Hmm.
And, and we just hadn't seen one in a long while. And figured like, well, we both can draw upon our experiences from our own loves of our, in our past life, and really bring something authentic to screen. So that's the avenue we decided to take.
Yeah. I commend you both. I think it's such a powerful depiction, and I think, especially in terms of the way it depicts Black sexual relationships and relations, as being tender and capable of running counter to the traditional images that we have of over aggressive Black male sexuality and those stereotypes. And I just thank you so much for creating such a beautiful depiction there.
Thank you. Thank you.
What are you working on now?
I'm working on a couple projects right now. Agents are always throwing more things my way, but I was working in television for about 6 or 7 years, and
Yeah.
that's been my bread and butter,
Mhm.
which has allowed me to make independent films that don't make a lot of money. But yeah, right now I'm kind of slowing down on that side and getting back into the feature side of things, which I really love. And so I'm developing a couple of features right now.
That's great. Were you working in TV at the same time or before Premature?
Yes. So for about 6 or 7 years leading up to Premature, the feature, I've been very blessed with the opportunity to work in television as an episodic director.
Yeah.
So I was able to save up like a little bit of a nest egg, which then helped with producing Premature. And then right after Premature, I went right back into TV to direct a couple of episodes. I direct an episode of Looking for Alaska, and which is on Hulu, I believe, and The Shy for Showtime, just to basically get me back to a place financially,
Yeah.
whereas before Premature. So yeah, it's been a real blessing to have that as not necessarily a fallback, but uh, being able to weave both the feature filmmaking and the television career uh, has allowed me to basically be an artist, because otherwise it it can be really really tough out here when you don't have a source of income, especially within your field of creativity,
Yeah.
that feeds you. Where I was able to work a muscle at the same time as earning a
Hmm.
living.
Yeah. And do you think that your experience working in TV equipped you with a certain skill set that helped in making Premature and will continue to help in your features, or vice versa? Do you think that there's a lot of conversation between those two styles of directing?
Yeah, I would say it absolutely helped. I mean, I wasn't necessarily aware of that when directing those shows, but I would say that television forces you to think on your feet, um, sometimes just as fast as when you're in independent film,
Oh
um,
wow.
because the clock is so much of a creates so much stress. You're required to shoot sometimes a very challenging amount of pages in a particular day. Let's say it's 43 minutes worth of material that you have to shoot, sometimes in 8 days, sometimes in 7, and sometimes in 6. And so, it helped me learn how to pick up speed and be very, very selective, and how to cover a scene in a variety of ways that, if I had to call an audible, could get us out of the scene and help us make the day in time. I don't know if I'm using terminology that's sort of over the head of the audience, but basically you're given an immense amount of material that you have to cover in a very short amount of time. And the TV world has helped me basically be more selective and and yeah, more decisive. So if I had planned to get a moving master that goes around their face and that goes into the like perhaps I'll look at the monitor and say, you know what, let's scratch that idea. All I need is for the camera to do this, and we've got the scene. Everybody agrees? Everybody okay? Let me check with the writer. Is it okay that we don't get any other coverage? Okay, great. Moving on. Like that kind of stuff. Like it helps you be on your toes a little bit more,
Right.
and call those audibles. And so, it definitely trained me for that. And then what else? I also watch, because I didn't necessarily want to contribute my episodes. I didn't want them necessarily to look like every other episode of every other show on television.
Mm-hmm.
I would try sometimes to work against that aesthetic, and so it would force me to come up with other ideas. And usually you wouldn't necessarily be able to pick my episode out necessarily from all the episodes in that show, because every show that you work on is trying to be cinematic and trying to be different. But when the clock is on, everybody sort of you're kind of forced sometimes into a box to just like get the coverage as soon as you can, and it sometimes looks like it's the same, but you still have in the back of your head, I'm trying to make it look good and make it look unique in a very short amount of time. So it forces you to be as creative as you can in a short amount of time.
Right. And I'm sure that that kind of necessary decisiveness forced by the TV production schedule helped you a lot with shooting film in Premature, where you're not getting a lot of takes, and, you want to make the most and best use of your shots.
Absolutely. That was a talking point between me and the DP, Laura Valadeo, before we started, was that because we're shooting on 16 millimeter film, we don't really have the luxury to get all of the coverage in the world, and we'll have to minimize our coverage, which means longer takes and fewer setups.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the look of the film is absolutely gorgeous as well. So credit to your cinematographer too.
Oh yeah, yes. Laura's a wonderful rising star out of NYU. I hadn't worked with her before, but she came highly recommended from a couple of my former professors at NYU.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us. We really appreciate it. And congrats to you and your team, and Zora especially. Pass on our congratulations on such an incredible film.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much for having me.
And maybe one thing before we go, if audiences are curious, where can they check out your previous film, Gun Hill Road?
Gun Hill Road is available, I guess, on iTunes, and probably you'll be able to rent it through Amazon Prime, I'm assuming. The website for Gun Hill Road is gunhillroad.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Rashaad. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again.
You're welcome. Take care.
All right. Take care.